asked 10-year-old me if I would have wanted to do that, and it would have made me pee my pants.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Epic Every Day, our weekday podcast for busy, overwhelmed Christians who don't want to stay in that place. We want to move into freedom and abundance and peace. I'm Liz Ferris, and this is my husband, Nevin.
Hey there.
And we're so glad you guys are here with us today.
Yes, we are. I was just thinking about the intro. We're especially relevant to this week's topic, moving into freedom and abundance and peace, because we're moving into our calling, which is the swim lane that God has designed for us to swim in.
Seriously, I just love that concept. You know, that slipstream idea that when we're...
I said swim stream. Swim lane.
Yeah, swim lane. That
I like
works too.
slipstream better.
But that's kind of like the same thing, that idea that when we align with the way God designed our lives to work, that everything is just, you get places faster with less effort. Everything just works so much better.
Yeah, there's still effort and pain,
Right.
growing pains, but yeah, there's something where it's like, that's where I'm supposed to be. This is what I was designed to do.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
It is awesome. And it's amazing how, you know, we don't necessarily recognize it when we're in the middle of it, but when we start moving our lives into that place, like, you see traction in ways that you never did before. Whether that's dealing with your emotional health or your physical health. I mean, some of the stuff that I've done over the last year, I mean, I've been working on these things for a lot longer than 1 year, but It's just been so amazing this last, sleeping through the night for the first time in my life. First time in my life.
Yeah.
My entire life. Since
Yeah.
I was born.
Yeah.
I know, but
but
sometimes people think that's an
astonishing.
exaggeration, but
Yeah.
really it's really not an exaggeration. I've had sleep issues my entire life.
Yeah.
And the fact that I've consistently slept through the night since like August is incredible. And it's because of this idea of aligning with the way God designed our bodies to work. And
Yeah. And some of these calling things, some of these slipstream things are applied to everyone. I mean, we talked about that during the health week, where it's like everybody's body is designed to work a certain way,
Right.
We eat junk, we get unhealthy. If we eat good things, we are more healthy. That's true for everybody.
Right.
But then there's calling specific things, which we'll get into more this week, that God's like, I'm going to make you this way,
Right. Yeah. And yesterday we talked about how calling is, being obedient to the things that God says, the good works that he's laid out in advance for you to do. And the amazing thing is that God lays out good works for each of us individually to do. Like, I can't do the good works that you've been laid out to do.
Yeah.
Or that have been laid out for you to do.
Yes.
Sounds like you just got punched, knocked out. Anyway. Yeah, I just love that they're so individually designed for us. So anyway, we're talking about calling this week, like we said. And since it's Tuesday, we're going to talk about surrender and calling.
Yeah. Surrendering our will to God's will. Because even though we're made a certain way, sometimes we don't even know what it is. And we hear God's calling, and sometimes we want to say no to that call or ignore it. There's a variety of reasons. But
yeah, I actually was thinking about that this morning. I'm reading in Luke right now for my quiet time, and for some reason it struck me when Jesus' parents take him to the temple, and they, it says over and over, they do what's commanded in the book of Moses. And it was just making me think about how, as a parent, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, how do I be a good parent? How do I not totally screw up our children?
yeah.
And the answer is to follow the principles in the Bible. Just like Joseph and Mary were like, all right, we're gonna take Jesus to the temple on the 8th day, just like it's commanded. They're going through the different things that are in the Bible. And I don't know, it just struck me really hard this morning that, like, even things like parenting, or there's a roadmap right there. There's a way to make sense of all the different advice that you're getting. And there's so many different parenting books, and sometimes it's overwhelming, but we have the Bible. It's right there.
Right. Yeah, that's our measuring stick. Yeah, with them, you wonder, or with anybody that's being obedient, like a child, you don't always know, well, why do I have to do it this way?
Right.
But we're saying yes to God. And I think I think lots of things can be understood, and that's the grace of God too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, even if we only did the commandments that we actually understood, we'd probably be further along than where we are now. Like, I can't remember who it was. There was a pastor who was talking to an atheist, bringing up all these different things that, what about this tricky little thing and this tricky little thing? And the pastor was like, I'm not worried about those things. First of all, because the Holy Spirit will reveal what's true. But second of all, it's more important to worry about the things I know I'm supposed to be doing right now.
Yeah. So I think when we're moving more and more into our calling, we're going to, I think we will, and I think this is by God's design, we'll get into areas that are impossible for us to do actually. And
Right.
we will have to have God's power to do them.
Right. Yeah. Like we talked about yesterday, how God's constantly calling us outside of our comfort zone. So, yes.
God's calling will require supernatural spiritual power to complete.
Right. And like we've talked about before, if you're not surrendered, you're like a hose that's all knotted up and the power of the Holy Spirit can't flow through you. Mm-hmm. So that means you're stuck doing things in your own power.
Yeah.
It doesn't work all that well.
Maybe you've got a pretty clear sense of what your calling is, but for some reason you're going to try to do it on your own. You're just going to be banging your head against a brick wall.
Well, and sometimes I think it's different little areas of our lives that we're like, okay, I'm going to surrender everything but this, not this. Sure. This is my thing. Or, and we don't even necessarily consider it not to be a surrender. Like, for instance, one of the things that has been hard for me to surrender is to stop worrying about different areas of my life and to just say, okay, yep, God's going to take care of that.
Yeah.
He's got a good plan.
Right.
I'm going to let go of that.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. Worry, for worriers, it for some reason feels like you're actually doing something, right. Or it feels...
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's really not. I think another thing that's hard to surrender is the things we know we're good at. It's like, I've got this one. God, I'm going to surrender all this stuff. But, this whole thing, I'm so good at it. I'm just going to do it.
Right.
I don't even need to pray about it. And that's a mistake. It makes me think about Jesus and his calling and his struggle in the Garden of Gethsemane. I mean, he knew what he was there to do, and he didn't necessarily want to do it. And he needed God's strength to go forward with the cross. I mean, that wrestling moment there is just so powerful.
Right, yeah, and if he can't do without the Lord's power, why do we think we can? I was thinking about, we talked a little bit yesterday about the parable of the talents. And I was thinking about that same section in Matthew 25 where the master says, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in a few things. And then he gives them more. Yeah. And so sometimes I think we want to jump ahead to having this super awesome, cool calling, whatever that looks like. Yeah. Talk to 1 million people or whatever it is, some big thing. And we forget that the big things are made up of thousands of small decisions that we've just been like, okay, I'm surrendering in this moment. I'm surrendering in this moment. And I think, that's part of why it's so easy to say, well, I'm surrendering in everything but this little thing.
Yeah. We don't realize how important that is.
Right. We don't see the weight of that little thing, that it's not actually little.
Yeah, I think the problem with projecting ahead like that is that's what I want my calling to be. I may not be preaching to a football stadium full of people like whatever that person wants,
Sometimes we can do things without the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. Like you were talking about with the things that you're already good at. Like, I can handle this. And maybe you can accomplish something, but love is fruit of the Holy Spirit, right? We can't do that without the Holy Spirit in Galatians 2. And Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 13 that if we don't have love, whatever we do is worthless. And so we may do all this work, put all this energy, pour ourselves into it. But without the power of the Holy Spirit, it's worthless.
Yeah,
It's wasted.
I think something else we need to overcome. I feel like this is just like a big old sprinkling of semi-random thoughts, but they are all connected.
We'll drag it back later.
Yeah. Something else we need to overcome, though, when we're pursuing our calling is there's some cultural damage that we need to overcome. If we're scared to step into our calling, I think that's a sign that there's cultural damage there, because moving in more into God's presence and God's will shouldn't cause us fear. But I can't. What do you think? Like, I've felt that where it's like, and I think that's fear of cultural repercussions of some kind, or of something we've learned along the way, and that's going to slow us down. We've got to overcome that, and that's another thing where we need to surrender to God's power to heal. If it's some damage to us, maybe some wound we've got for some reason, we're having trouble trusting God, or we're just kind of worried. I mean, the Bible talks about, consider God's how God thinks of you, not the way men think of you.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I wrote down, that God's character is really what allows us to surrender. And just like we talked about last week with addictions, if you believe that God is a taker instead of a giver, it's really hard to surrender. Really hard.
Mm-hmm. And I think, and you just, even if you trust God fully, there's going to be cultural problems. I mean, Jesus's ministry had all kinds of problems from the religious establishment. His supposed mentors, he was a rabbi. The other rabbis, the teachers of the law, and the scribes and Pharisees hated him. Yeah. And yet he pushed into his calling every single day.
Yeah, there's a great prophecy in Luke 2. I think it's Luke 2. Yeah. Where Simeon is prophesying over Jesus and is talking about how he's going to cause strife, basically. Mm-hmm. And I was just, I don't know, I love that. Like, Jesus is the perfect man. He's doing everything right. And people still hate him. And he's still rocking the boat constantly. And I just love that, when we're following God, rocking the boat is not a sin.
I'm an introvert. And so that's my personality type. And I think that's part of my spiritual DNA and my physical DNA. I think that's just fine. That's the way God made me. And I think that's good. But I also think there's callings that I have that I've tried to pursue that push me out of that comfort zone.
Yeah.
One of them is playing music. And I mean, you can play music by yourself in your bedroom all day long, but I think part of music's purpose is to be performed in front of people and enjoyed by, people that aren't musicians and stuff like that. So I've got over stage fright by playing music in front of people a lot. And there's been some of my duties as an elder and a Sunday school teacher that have been similar, where it's like, now I've got to talk to these people. Like, I got to the point where it was like, I have my little comfort zone behind the drum set. So if I was in front of people, but I was behind my drum set, I was totally comfortable. Even though at first it was just like, what? This is scary.
Yeah.
But now I feel like by the grace of God, I've overcome stage fright. And that's a huge fear for a lot of people. And it definitely was for me too. And I don't feel like I'm no orator and I'm no great performer, vocally or anything like that. But I feel like it's something I can do, and it's all by the power of God, and it's part of my calling, and I actually enjoy it, even though ask 10-year-old me if I would have wanted to do that, and it would have made me pee my pants.
That's awesome.
Saying yes to things, moving out of your comfort zone, and asking for God to be like, are you serious about this? What the heck? You're going to have to, give me the strength to do this.
I feel like one of mine is just making mistakes. Like, that was such a huge deal growing up that, like, either you did it perfectly the first time or you didn't do it at all. Like, there was no room for making any mistakes. So one of the things
so that's
the
a
Lord's
cultural hardwire, like this thing you had to overcome. Yeah.
Right. So then, when you are a writer, like, by nature, you're supposed to turn off your internal editor. Yeah. And just make mistakes.
Who's
it's like
proud
painting.
of their rough draft? I mean, any writer, right?
Seriously. So yeah, that's definitely been a stretch for me to be like, okay, I'm going to let myself make mistakes.
And the struggle for you, I think, is to keep going, right?
Oh,
To do the
yeah.
second and third and fourth and 10th and 20th draft
Right.
until it's the way you want it.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
can
because I
see
wanted
that.
to just be perfect the first time around. And so
That's not how
having
it
to
works.
learn
Yeah.
that like skill building, like there's a difference between innate things that we just know how to do or
Like breathing. I
skills.
mean, what else is there?
Well, okay, things that we're naturally good at.
Okay, yeah.
You know, like
Sure.
I never had to work at school or
Yeah.
I've
Jealous.
never there's a lot of things that just required very little effort. So having to do something that's really hard and do it every stinking day for years,
Yeah.
day in, day out, and it's never like, oh yeah, now this is super easy. Yay.
Right. It's still a struggle.
Right.
But
Yeah.
you trust it as part of your calling. So,
Right. Well, I know it's part of my calling, so I just have to keep doing it. Because every time I'm like, Lord, are you really sure this is what I should be doing? He's very clear. So, yeah.
cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Anyway, so hopefully that kind of, to tie it all together, if you're not surrendering, you can't do your calling. Even if it's just
it's
a
impossible.
teeny tiny little place in your life that you're hanging on to. Because you can't love, you can't do things with the power of the Holy Spirit. It's going to take way more work and you're going to accomplish nothing.
Yeah. And God's calling always is to past ourselves, past our ability.
Right.
Because we're designed to be in relationship with Him. We're not designed to,
Be able to
like-
go it alone.
that's not us.
Yeah. All right. We love you guys and we are praying for you. Thank you so much to everybody that's been sharing the show. We really appreciate it. If you have found this show helpful, please do share it. And if you have something that you're like, oh yeah, I know that's my calling, we'd love to hear about it because I love hearing people's story of how God has called them to different things.
Me too.
So, yeah. Come back tomorrow and we'll talk some more about calling and being centered. Super excited about that.
All right. Look forward to it. See you then.
Bye.